Okay, so let's make an attempt here to explain some of the background mechanics of ICBM. I'm not going to explain the content itself, but how some of the content functions. It's going to be a little difficult because I haven't made any props or anything to do this. This is basically unscripted, which is, for those of you who watch my videos, that's pretty much all of them. But let's see. The first thing to really explain would be the missile flight system. So let's get a couple missiles out here and kind of just show how the missile works real quick, and then go back to talking about the background mechanics of it. Keep this simple and just make a simple launcher. Target it about 100 blocks away and fire. So, how the missiles work is, a lot of people have probably disagreed with this, is that they go straight up, they disappear, then they reappear over the target. This is different than the original 1.64 version, but it's not going to entirely stay this way for those of you that are going to start arguing that you like the old way better. The entire concept behind this of making it appear and disappear is to save on resources on a server. A lot of servers who actually play with ICBM are not your best run servers. They're barely clinging to the amount of RAM they have and CPU they have. They maybe have like one core to work with. That core is probably only a couple gigahertz. The server itself can probably only support like 20 people. So the old way of doing it would have murdered that server. There would have been no recovery. Because a missile in the old days would end up chunk loading everything from it to the target. So at short ranges, you had no problem. It would go up, it would do its arcing curve, and it would come back down, which was great. Really beautiful, allowed for some really cool physics and a gameplay. The downside is long-range targets. It would chunk load everything, and it could chunk load up to 12 chunks per second of flight. And it was really bad at doing it because at the time, it was coded by Calclavia when the chunk loading system in Forge came out, and both him and the chunk loading system were not really well developed. So he didn't code it very well thinking of how it was going to function, and Forge really wasn't coded that well to handle chunk loading. It's improved, but pretty much ICBM has ditched the idea of chunk loading. I may re-implement it in the future for the much larger missiles, but that's going to be on a much complicated side. Other than that, I will be re-implementing the arcing at short range and a few other game mechanics, like riding missiles. All you guys love riding missiles. I love it too. It was my best way of getting around servers when I didn't have teleportation. That will be re-implemented. It'll be re-implemented through the saddle. So there'll be, well, it won't be the saddle per se. There'll be a modified version of this that you'll be able to put on standard, medium, and large missiles. You can't put them on the small or micros, because of course, riding a micro missile when it's the size of your arm is not going to work. Riding a small missile when it's barely the size of your torso is also not going to work. But we'll let you ride the standards and up. Moving on, so I'm not revealing all the features I've got planned because there's a lot of them. The radar system was another thing that I always get asked about, how it works. The old way was literally a list. So you had a list, it more can be perceived like a bin. It's like a trash can. You just kind of threw things in it and you went, okay, here, this is on the radar system, this is on the radar system, this is on the radar system. And it worked with literally everything. So you could see like sheep, creepers, zombies, other players, machines, rockets, not just from ICBM, you could see ones from other mods, including Galacticraft. The system sucked. It caused a lot of issues, because if I wanted to make a radar dish, which there was one in ICBM, each radar dish essentially iterated over the entire radar list every single time it wanted to figure out what was within range to display on that GUI to the player, and if it needed to trigger redstone in case you were about to be hit by a missile. This meant as the list got bigger, you needed more CPU cycles to iterate over the list. And if you had more radar dishes, it took even more CPU cycles. So one radar dish was fine. 2 radar dishes was okay. But if every single player had like 6 or 7 radar dishes, which even for servers like mine, we had like almost 20 radar dishes per person because the radar dishes had a limited range. I think they were like 200 blocks is what they could see. And if you had a big base, you would stick this radar dish and then you would have a redstone controller going back to a missile defense system or force fields. I know I did. I had like these massive force field arrays that would protect my base, and though eventually I ended up resorting to AA guns. But that system sucked. We'll stop at that part. The new system works on a chunk by chunk basis, and if I can get chunks to render, nope, I don't have any AI running. But for those of you who are not familiar, a chunk is a 16 by 16. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So it's basically that square area. That's how Minecraft saves everything. The radar system now works on a chunk by chunk basis and a world by world system. This solves a lot of issues. Because now if I want to scan radar-wise, which is what the AMS turrets do, in case everybody's not familiar, these little guys actually have built-in radar. That will change eventually because, of course, these are prototype turrets. I want to actually make them more realistic later with attaching radar systems and stuff like that. But right now, this solves the problem of your base getting absolutely railed by missiles. So these guys use that system. And they'll go to the radar system and say, hey, I want to know what's within range of me. And it'll specify a range of, I think it's about 250 straight up for this AMS turret, and I believe 100 in every direction. So it's straight up every direction. The radar system will then go and scan its directory, and its directory is based on chunks. So it doesn't iterate over the entire list. It goes hash map. I want to know what's at this chunk, this chunk, this chunk, and this chunk. And it figures out what chunks is from the area of the system, which is some complex algorithms behind that to get that data. But it runs so much quicker. So where you had an example, and I've actually tested this, although I don't have the results anymore. The previous system, if I dumped 10,000 missiles into it, would take seconds to run. The new system takes nanoseconds to run. Nanoseconds are dramatically smaller because it goes like second, millisecond, micro, then nano. In size, if you're not familiar with the metric system. It's basically times 10 to the negative 9, I believe. I could be wrong on that because, of course, I'm also not familiar with the metric system very well. But beyond just the performance issue, the radar system also, the new one allows us to do a lot more. Radar ranges no longer have to be square-based, as the old system was. They can be circular, they can be diamond-shaped, they can be very bizarre shapes and still function. This is to allow for one of our future plans, which is actually to add radar blind spots. So say, for example, that mountain village over there, because villages spawn weird in super flats. If we had a radar system here, and it could see past that village, the village actually would block its sight from seeing on the other side. Because how radar works is you send a wave out, the wave hits an object, then comes back, and you listen for that wave to come back to your thing. And you get the distance by taking the amount of time it took to send it out, and et cetera, et cetera. And that tells you exactly where something is. So on the other side of this village, we wouldn't see anything because the radar can't see through it. What that means is that a missile could come through and at the last second dodge through the city and then hit us, and we wouldn't be able to react quick enough. Because I'm also going to be implementing radar delays and radar angles. So if you have a radar dish can only detect things that are pointing in front of it. So as it rotates, it can only see what's in front of it. This means there's going to be a huge delay in your radar. This will allow different types of radar to start propagating, including giant flat-paced radar arrays, which if I open up my Google here, radar array. For those who are not familiar with radar arrays, they're these things. Big flat metal objects that can only see in one direction. They can see very, very far. They're not very accurate though, and they don't rotate. But that'll be implemented here along with things like that and these things, various types of radars. Other than that, on the front end, it still works about the same as the old system. So you'll be able to see missiles as they come in. You won't be able to see entities anymore because I'm going to not be dumping a whole bunch of data into the radar system at a whim, so you guys could do whatever. I may implement different versions of the radar that do that. because that was one of the bigger issues that was coming out of the older system. The older system not only had performance issues, it had a lot of crashes involved with it. I know I've patched at least 90 issues for clients over the last couple of years who wanted their servers to still exist in 1.5 and 1.6. One of the big issues was players would drop off. So if you had like 50 people in the server and you would be playing, if the radar system was active, it would just take the server out. This, in theory, I'm not quite sure what exactly is going on with it because I haven't fixed that issue per se, but in theory, this is being caused by the fact that more and more data was being dumped in the radar system, and it was starting to slow the server down to the point where the ping connection timeout for the Java was activating and kicking people off the server. Because you gotta imagine, if you have 50 people online and there's like 200 mobs per player, that's about 100,000 mobs, not including the number of missiles and tile entities, because the radar system could see tile entities, which, even though it was a cool thing, it kind of worked against you most of the days. But that's, of course, that's been fixed because now the new radar system can capacitate hundreds of thousands of entries and not die. Another issue is there was hard referencing. So we were holding on to references for players, entities, and stuff. So if they went to go unload, they couldn't because the radar system was like, hey, we got a reference attached to you, and the garbage collector was like, hey, well, if you got a reference attached, you can keep that object. The new system soft references everything, so as soon as it unloads, it goes away. And then the radar system goes, okay, that's not loaded anymore, ditch it from the radar system. It fixes a lot of issues. But I'll stop this video here, considering if you can hear my dog whining in the background. She wants to go on a walk. And I'm running out of material to talk about. I'll talk about some more mechanics here later, like the crafting system, why it's being implemented the way it is, how the launchers are being developed and worked on, and why there's a ton of biome IDs here. But that'll be for another video. This has been Dark Guardsman from BuiltBrokenModding, and I hope you guys like whatever. So.